Think of what we could do together.
So this one came out about a month ago when I was still on hiatus, but I feel like I should still say something about it, because if you watched my original review of the first one or the top 10 list I put out late last year, you saw I went to bat pretty hard for it. And while I seem to be higher on it than other critics, I'll admit a lot of that hinged on what seemed to be a willingness to change things up for Act 2. I'm sure you've heard it by now, but back when this was first announced as a 2-film project, the consensus among Wicked fans was, hey, this sounds great, but what the heck are you going to do about Act 2? Because Part 1 is easy. Of the 10 best songs in the musical, I'd say 8 are in the first act. It's funnier, it's more lighthearted, the familiarity of the college setting makes it a lot easier for audiences to get with the weirdness that is the world of Oz. Meanwhile, the second act is darker, more complicated, weighed down by Bush-era politics that were outdated 15 years ago, has to juggle with weaving its way in and out of the 1939 Wizard of Oz film without ever just saying it outright, and diverges even further from the source material. Now, none of this stopped Wicked from becoming a multi-billion-dollar global phenomenon as a stage play, but if you've seen it, you know that it manages to sidestep a lot of those problems thanks to its runtime. Act 1 of the musical typically runs about 90 minutes. It ends with defying gravity, goes right into intermission, and by the time the curtain is back up for Act 2, the audience is still on the adrenaline high from that song, which usually sticks around just long enough until No Good Deed comes along, after which the story sprints its way to an ending while cramming in as many Wizard of Oz Easter eggs as possible. And because of how quickly that happy ending arrives, it doesn't hit you until you're out of the theater that it's also kinda tragic and doesn't really have much of a message. The person who just spent the bulk of the story fighting an oppressive regime gets her happy ending by faking her own death and running off with her scarecrow boyfriend, never getting to reap the rewards of overthrowing the wizard and leaving her best friend to assume she's dead. It's still worlds better than the utterly dour book ending, but seems to have the final message of,
the lesson is, never try.
And that's without even getting into just how ugly the Nessa Rose subplot winds up being. So like many fans, I held out hope that John Chu and the studio would try to steer Act 2 in a different direction. Not so much that it would be unrecognizable from the musical, but maybe replace some of the weaker aspects with new ideas. Maybe give your own interpretation of the Wizard of Oz events. The news of new songs being added in sounded promising, but what we wound up getting was basically exactly what everybody was worried about, with some extra filler added in to beef up the runtime. The end result is a film that got worse reviews, a worse box office draw, and outside of that one Jeff Goldblum commercial, it feels like everybody moved on from it after the first weekend. And unless Ariana gets some massive behind-the-scenes push for an Oscar nod, it doesn't sound like it's going to have much of a presence at awards season. You know it's a bad sign when you're the biggest musical of the year and don't make the cut for Best Musical at the Golden Globes.
Not great, Bob.
So what went wrong? I think 2 reasons. The filmmakers came at it from the position that Act 2 didn't need fixing. They didn't have to adjust much with Act 1, so why mess with the formula? Nessa still winds up being a tyrant with a hilariously bad death scene. Elphaba's win comes in the form of getting with Fiero and basically nothing else, and Glinda winds up running Oz by being pretty and doing as little as possible. But I also think that longer runtime actually wiped out the advantages that the stage play had. Now all the scenes are stretched out to where you can't help but notice the awkwardness that was paved over by a quicker pace. There are these long moments where you're left going, wait, how could all of that stuff have still happened in the movie if the characters are acting like this? Yeah, Bach was always gung-ho about killing the witch, but why does Glinda give Dorothy the slippers? Why did Fiero ever go along with Dorothy if he knew the whole thing was a charade? When did he and Elphaba come up with the whole fake your death plan? Why isn't the lion just trying to get out of Oz like the rest of the talking animals? And since they insisted on this damn thing being well over 2 hours, you're left to kinda stew in those questions for most of the movie. The new songs were nothing to write home about either. There's no place like home, it's just a narrative cul-de-sac to fill for time. And while The Girl in the Bubble is well done thanks to Ariana's talent, it's just going over the same notes as other songs like Thank Goodness. It also feels like they knew these songs weren't going to hit like they did in the first movie, so they tossed in more reprises to the songs you do already know. I'm fine when musicals do that on stage, especially when it's for a dramatic effect, but here it just felt like padding. Was there anything I liked? Well, Cynthia Erivo still knocked it out of the park with No Good Deed, and Jeff Goldblum was always masterful casting for this. I liked that we got more of the talking animals. Always felt weird that that was one of Elphaba's driving motivators, even though they take a back seat in the story once she finds a kidnapped Dr. Dillamond. Having Glinda's wedding be what gets ruined was a better motivator for her brief heel turn, and I liked that the movie added her into the wonderful sequence to give her more screen time with Elphaba. That relationship is always where the story was at its strongest, and Act 2 cut down on a lot of it. But if I could sum up my thoughts on Wicked for Good, it was that it was a car crash I was given a 2 years head's notice on, but was powerless to stop. I'm glad some folks enjoyed it, but a month later, I'm not surprised that it disappeared from the conversation. But what did you guys think? Am I being too harsh on this one? Let me know what you think down in the comments. I'll see you guys next time.